If you built a product and you've got revenues flowing, however, you don't have that predictable revenue machine yet. You don't have that scalable revenue machine where you put in $1 and you get back $2, then it's time to revamp your go-to-market plan. When I first created my go-to-market plan for my last company, I thought I knew what I was doing. It wasn't until I got paired up with some of the best go-to-market experts in the business that I really see what it takes to build an effective go-to-market plan that drives growth. So in this episode, I'm gonna walk you through the 6 steps that you absolutely need to follow to implement your go-to-market plan. And when you implement these principles, you will be able to accelerate your path to that next stage of growth. Intro. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Unstoppable. I'm TK, and on this channel, I help SaaS founders like you grow your SaaS business faster with an unstoppable strategy. Now, if you're new to this channel, welcome. I drop an episode every single Sunday with actionable strategies and tactics from the trenches on how to grow your SaaS business faster. So if you're new, be sure to hit that subscribe button and that bell icon. That way you'll get notified every single time I drop an episode with the TK energy. Now, if you're already part of this community, if you're part of my SaaS go-to-market coaching programs, my people, welcome back. It's really awesome to see you over here. Truth be told, I record this episode every single year on this channel. This is my 6th year running my go-to-market program, and this is my 6th year running this channel. And every single year, I try to put out a go-to-market plan episode like this based on everything that I've learned. When I first did this, I had learned a number of things from building my last company, ToutApp. As part of ToutApp, we were backed by Andreessen Horowitz. We scaled the company and we sold it to a market leader called Marketo. I joined as SVP of strategy at Marketo. I served on their executive team. I led different regions and revamped their go-to-market plans. And as part of that, we did a 2-year transformation and sold it to Adobe for $4.75 billion. Since that, I started my go-to-market program, and I've helped hundreds of SaaS founders revamp their go-to-market plan and drive growth for their SaaS businesses. So in this episode, I'm going to take everything that I've learned, both in being in the trenches and actually scaling companies, and also coaching SaaS founders in implementing all these principles. I'm going to walk you through the 6 steps that you absolutely need to know on how to drive growth for your SaaS business and how to actually build an effective go-to-market plan. If you're excited to dig into principle number 1 and step number 1, go ahead and smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm, and let's dig right into it. There's a saying that really sticks with me, and I try to teach every single founder that I coach: great founders focus on markets instead of ideas. And this is one of the things that I had to really get great at when I was first starting to get into the startup game. As an engineer, I just obsess about the cool features and the cool ideas. But in reality, the real thing that matters is the markets you're going after. And so one of the first steps in building an effective go-to-market plan, this is what I was taught when I was getting into the game, is to really establish the true bounding box of where you're going to be operating. So step number 1 is to define the market you're going after. Specifically, you really want to highlight exactly what type of industry, what type of role, what type of company you're really targeting. And more importantly, you really want to identify what is the urgent and important problem that your product solves. Ultimately, it's problems that drive the need for buying software. And while we love the ideas that we have, and while we love the amazing features that we have, the truth is customers aren't really buying your product or will not buy your product because they love you. They're buying it because there's a problem that exists. And step number 1 in building an effective go-to-market plan is to really look at your existing customers, really look at where you're getting existing traction, and really define what segment of the market, what exactly is the market that you're going after where this urgent and important problem exists. Once you've really started to define your target market where you want to be building your go-to-market plan around, the second step in this is to identify the why. Now, it can be very easy to just say, this is the market we're going after, and therefore they're going to buy from us. But one of the steps that I found really valuable when helping founders build out their go-to-market plan is to establish why this is the right market to go after. The trick that I use with founders is we try to find the right macro trend. Macro trend describes some big thing that's happening in your target market. So for example, my target market are SaaS founders. And there's a macro trend where 92% of SaaS companies fail within 3 years despite initial funding and initial revenues. This is a real macro trend that exists in our industry, and every SaaS founder is worried about it. It means that you can build a product, you can start to generate early revenues, but within 3 years, despite funding, you don't get to that next stage of growth. That is a macro trend. And it explains why there's a need for my product and my videos and everything else that I do. The same is true for the market that you're going after. So the second step in building a proper go-to-market plan is to really stress test what is this urgent and important problem and what is the macro trend that exists that really necessitates and proves this is truly an urgent and important problem. You do these two things, you start to get a real definition of the target market you're going after and why it exists, and you get out of your own head on trying to convince yourself something that may not be true. Because at the end of the day, you may be going out and saying, hey, this is a really urgent, important problem, but if you can't quite find that macro trend that proves it, then chances are you're trying to convince yourself of something that isn't true. But when you do find that really great macro trend, this actually helps in two ways. One, it brings mental clarity on exactly the market you're going after and why it exists, but also that macro trend can be used across your sales and marketing activities to show how important your product is and also drive urgency in your deals. This will come in later, and I'll talk about it later in one of the subsequent steps. Once you've established the market and once you've established the why, the macro trend, then comes the third part. The third part is positioning. Even with this target market and this bounding box, it can be a very big market. And in software, we've learned that we can actually segment the market in specific ways. So in terms of the target market for SaaS, you can actually break this down into selling to the small and medium-sized businesses. You can go after the mid-market, and you can go after the enterprise. And this can be broken down in a more detailed way as well. You can go after the little enterprise or the upper mid-market, or the lower mid-market. And you can even go after solo users. So there are different segments of the market that you can be going after as you are starting to define what your go-to-market plan is going to be. Now, this is important for a number of reasons. The first reason is it helps you really chunk down which segment of the market you can be the most competitive, where you can really solve the problem, or the segment of the market where the problem is the most pronounced. It also really drives how you're going to communicate. So by the time you are actually running that ad, or you're creating your website, you're doing all the marketing motions, which comes at a later step, you're going to be a lot more custom focused on the specific segment of the market. And the more focused you are, the more effective your messaging is going to be. So positioning, really figuring out what segment of the market you're going to be focusing on, is one of the key steps to building a proper go-to-market plan. Now, if you go after the entire market, well, it's possible to do that, but you may not have the budget to really reach that entire segment of the market. There's only so much money you can spend on ads or outbound or cold calling. So the more specific you get and the more intentional you get about the segment of the market you go after, the more effective your go-to-market motions are going to be later on, which is a later step that I'll cover. Now, as you're thinking about positioning, there's a couple of nuances to this. So one of the things that's true in SaaS is if you are selling to the SMB or solo, then likely it's going to be impacting how you sell your product. It will also be impacting how you price your products. If you're selling to SMBs and solo, you probably can't afford salespeople. It means that they can't afford these big 6-figure deals or 10-figure deals, so they can only pay, say, $49 a month or $9 a month, in which case you can't really pay a salesperson and pay their salary and their commission to be able to serve this market. As you start to pick the segment of the market you're going after, it will have implications on how you actually execute on your go-to-market plan and your pricing. So in this case, if you're going after SMB, it's going to be relatively cheap. But if you're going after the enterprise, chances are you're going to have to charge a good amount of money so that you can afford the marketing and the enterprise sales reps that are required to be able to sell into that market. So the more upmarket you go, the more you're going to have to charge, and also the more complex of the sales motion you're going to have. In this kind of scenario, you will likely have a product-led growth motion where they start a free trial and use the product on their own. Whereas on this side, there may be a full sales process and there may be a demo, and you might actually have to go on site to actually sell to them. So all these things start to become more complex. which means that you have a much more complex sales process. So as you're starting to think about the positioning in the market and what segment of the market you really want to go after, you can start to think about the implications of that. Meaning if you're going after the SMB, well, you will architect your website and the primary button a certain way and your product-led experience a certain way. But if you're actually going after a higher end of the market, well, then you have to actually architect a proper sales process. So all these little nuances start to come together as you decide on the positioning for your market. Okay, so once you do these three things, you start to get an understanding of where you're going to be playing. And this is a critical part of your go-to-market plan. One of the things you'll notice is we haven't run a single ad yet. We haven't talked about what goes on your website. We haven't done an outbound campaign. And that's intentional. What this really does is, as part of the planning process, and this is what I learned from the best, as part of the planning process, we start to first get really intentional about where are we gonna play, how are we gonna differentiate, and how do we make sure that by the time we're executing, we actually know what we're doing and we're being very intentional, and we know that we stand a chance at winning. This is the whole point of building out a proper go-to-market plan and a go-to-market strategy, because it forces you to make some tough decisions up front instead of just sending out 10,000 emails and wondering why no one responded. So let me just pause here for a second before I go to step number 4. Are you starting to see the power in this? If you're starting to see the power of building a proper plan before you start executing, so that by the time you start executing, you're more set up to succeed. If you're starting to see the power in this, can I just get a yes in the comments below? And also smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. It just loves it when you do that. Also, as you're going through this, if you're starting to get questions, if you're starting to get some aha moments, I would love to hear from you in the comments below. So just put in the comments any questions that you have or any thoughts that you have as you're going through this already. I want you to take a really active role in this, because if you really get this right, it will set you up for success and hitting that next stage of growth for your SaaS business. And one of the ways to do that is start to make some notes about what is your target market. Is it an urgent and important problem? What is the macro trend? Which segment of the market do you want to go after? And just share it below so I can hear from you. Also, if you're in this stage where you're building out your go-to-market plan and you want to work with me to actually implement all these steps, then you should check out my SaaS go-to-market coaching program. You don't have to go anywhere right now. I'll tell you more about it at the end of this episode. I'll also link to it below. Let's go to step number 4. This is where a lot of these pieces start to come together. Step number 4, and a lot of people skip this because it's scary, and trust me, I've done this too, but I like to make sure that I light a little candle, I put on some soothing music, and I really go out there and look at the competition. Now, I know that you have the best product in the business, but at the same time, your customers don't know that yet. And in order for your customers to ever discover your product, your go-to-market and your marketing and your sales has to communicate that you are better than the competition. And there's no way you're gonna know how to communicate how you're better, how to differentiate from your competition, unless you spend a little bit of time figuring out what your competition is doing. So one of the things I like to do is set aside an hour and really start to do a bunch of Google searches and really start to look at all the websites of my competition and look at their G2 reviews, so I can start to map out where are the competitors in the different chessboard of the market. Are they serving the SMB? Are they serving the enterprise? Are they serving the little enterprise or the upper mid-market? And I like to map out where these competitors exist. And this does a couple of things. One, it just helps me understand what my customers are already seeing in this market. Because chances are, if I'm running an ad or I'm doing outbound or I'm generating leads through organic social content, any number of marketing and sales motions, right alongside it, they're going to see messaging from my competitors because they're targeting the same segment of the market. And what this really does is helps me understand, how am I going to be different? And also, do I just go and directly compete against one of these guys? Or do I go after a different segment in the market where there isn't a lot of competition? And that's the distinction in this, because by looking at the competitive dynamics in this market, it helps you go back and look at what is my market thesis and am I in the right one? What is the right macro trend? And am I positioned in the right place? One of two things is going to happen. One, you might realize there's a segment of the market where competitors don't exist, meaning they're not serving a certain segment of the market. In that case, this is what we call white space. It means that there's an underserved segment of the market. If you find an underserved segment of the market, then chances are there's opportunity there. It could also be that that's just a terrible market, which is why competition is not there. So this is where you go back and figure out the macro trend and really start to understand, is that a good market? Is the problem truly urgent and important for that segment of the market or not? It'll help you stress test it. You could also decide, you know what? I actually don't want to go after the white space. There's a reason why no one's competing in there. One of my features makes me 10 times better than anything else that's out there. Or you might say, you know what? It's traditional SaaS companies that are competing over here, and I'm building out an AI-enabled SaaS offering, which means that everything is 10 times faster. So I'm gonna go after and compete against these guys and really beat them and really highlight how we're 10 times better than the competition. So what this really allows you to do is understand the competitive dynamics instead of ignoring it, because I know it can be scary to look at, but then say, cool, what segment of the market am I going after? What's my positioning and what's the macro trend? So I can truly compete against these guys. And that's why spending a little bit of time to look at the competition makes a huge difference, because at the end of the day, your potential customers, your target customers are being inundated by your competition. So you should understand how you can differentiate yourself. So by the time they look at you, they immediately understand, oh, these guys are different. I really want to do business with them, which is the way you actually create an effective go-to-market plan. Once you've mapped out the competition, then a lot of these pieces start to come together. Step number 5 is to actually develop your messaging. Now, messaging shows up in a couple of different ways. The simplest way is your website. As soon as you go to your website, the big text, the hero text that's up there is your messaging. It also shows up in ads. In your ads, there's messaging that really needs to be speaking to your ideal customer. Messaging shows up in outbound emails. Messaging shows up in your organic posts, in your blogs and keywords. Whatever you do in terms of sales and marketing, messaging shows up in your sales deck, so you can actually guide people through the process and get them to buy and align the different buying groups. Messaging is one of the key pieces, and messaging done in a vacuum tends to not be very effective. This is why I meet so many founders who maybe hired a fractional CMO that can't get a real CMO job and burned through 3 months of paying them and got nothing on the other end, even though they did a bunch of activities. Or they paid an agency and the agency came from the right place, but there just wasn't enough budget to really figure out where the heat is in the market, so they couldn't really get results. So founders that really embrace building a go-to-market plan themselves and then go to the right service providers to execute on that plan tend to do better. Founders that run some of those go-to-market motions at first to really understand the data, and then they know like this is working, and then hire agencies to go scale it out, tend to do better. So it's super important to really create your thesis on what your messaging is going to be. There's 2 core pieces of messaging that you want to define as part of this step. The first one is your value proposition. Your value proposition is your one sentence that clearly articulates what you do in the market for who 10 times better than the competition. I like to use the grandma test when we're working on value propositions. It's Thanksgiving and grandma asks you what your company does. Can you actually explain in one simple sentence what your company does? And most of your family will understand. This is where fancy words tend to not work. And the truth is, if grandma can understand what you do and why you're better, then your ideal customers who are very, very distracted in a noisy world will also understand it. So creating your value proposition really helps you understand how you differentiate in the market. And that feeds into stuff like your homepage messaging and your ads and everything else. The other piece that I like to work on with founders when we're building out their go-to-market plan is their strategic narrative. There's 2 big pieces of competition that exist when you're trying to sell software. The first one is apathy. The apathy is where they kind of know this is an urgent and important problem, but there's a bunch of other stuff and they're not really going to move right away. And so you really have to find a way to inspire them to move faster. You have to educate them to help them understand why they need to move on this now. The other type of competition, the other reason that you need to overcome is actual competition in a deal where they're looking at your competitor and they're trying to understand whether they should go with you or someone else. In that kind of scenario, you really need to educate them about why you understand their problem better than anyone else. In either of these cases where you're trying to battle apathy or you're trying to battle actual competition, one of the things that comes in handy in your go-to-market motions is a strategic narrative. A strategic narrative, I call this a manifesto, helps you really structure a way of communicating what you do, why you do it, and what's the transformation you bring to your customers' lives in a way where they will really resonate with. It is a specific way of educating them of why you actually do what you do and why they need to choose you versus anyone else in the market. One of the things I found, this is my 6th year running the go-to-market program and running the channel, creating the strategic narrative clarifies a whole lot of things. It clarifies your messaging, it clarifies your product roadmap, it clarifies who you're serving, and it clarifies what you put in your homepage, and it clarifies the type of marketing motions you're going to run. It's a specific process that I take you through, but when you craft a proper strategic narrative, it helps you really get a deeper understanding of what it is you're doing in the market and gets you to a point where you can look at any prospect and say, look, this is why we do what we do, and here's why you should go with us, and you would be crazy to go with anyone else in the market. And that's the type of conviction we want you to achieve when you are running your go-to-market plays so that you can actually accelerate your path to that next stage of growth. So this is where messaging comes in really handy, and that's step number 5. Once you've done these 5 steps, then comes the fun part. Then comes step number 6, and that's execution. Now, there are 13 different ways to go to market. Each of those ways have unique advantages and disadvantages. And each of those ways work for certain segments in the market and don't work for certain segments in the market. One of the things you'll have to figure out is once you have your targeting, that's the target market you're going after. Once you have very specific segment of the market you're going after, once you understand the competitive dynamics, and once you have your messaging, then you'll have to figure out, cool, how do we get that messaging in front of our ideal customers on a consistent basis? Now, you could be doing this through inbound, you could be doing this through outbound, and you could be doing this through channels. And all of these break down into multiple different channels that you can be going after. And it really depends on the segment of the market you're going after and also what your capabilities are. One of the things I've found is founders really need to first figure out what their messaging is and figure out a way to iterate on it and get it right. And then they can turn on as many of these 13 channels as possible as they look to scale. So it really is one of those things where the slower you go in the beginning, the faster you can go in the long run. Founders that really take the time to think through these 5 steps and then get into execution are the ones that do really well in the market because they come from a place of conviction. And when it comes to go-to-market execution, one of the key pieces that you'll also want to do is collect the right data. One of the things I found is it's never perfect when you first get it out, but if you collect the right data, you'll be able to understand, is my targeting right? Is the market right? Is my messaging right? And based on the data, you can iterate on it and it gets better and better and better and better and better. And that's what allows for you to truly achieve scale. All right, so those are the 6 steps to building a proper go-to-market plan. And when you implement these 6 steps, you'll be able to accelerate your path to that next stage of growth. Let's recap them. Step number 1 is to really figure out the bounding box, the target market you're going after. Once you really understand the target market and have defined what is the urgent and important problem that exists, then you want to get into step number 2. Step number 2 is where you define the macro trend that proves that this is truly an urgent and important problem. This macro trend helps bring you clarity on what you're doing, but also can be used in your go-to-market motions to educate your customers on why they need to take action right now. The macro trend that I use for my specific market, for SaaS founders, is that 92% of SaaS companies fail within 3 years despite initial revenues and funding. And one of the biggest reasons that they fail is they don't really have a proper distribution strategy. They don't have proper go-to-market plans, which is one of the macro trends that proves what I do and things that I teach is super valuable. So you want to find the macro trend that's relevant for you. Once you figure out the macro trend in the target market, then you want to map out the market and really figure out where you want to position yourself. There are different segments of the market you can go after. You could go after the SMB, the mid-market, the enterprise, and depending on the segment of the market you're going after, it will dictate how much you can charge and the type of sales process you have, whether it's product-led or it's sales-driven or it's some sort of hybrid. Once you've figured out the positioning, then it's time to really stress test it. So that's when you look at the competition. I know it's not the most fun thing to do. Just light a candle, put on some music, and really look at the competition and time box yourself to an hour to understand what are the competitive dynamics in the market. Is there a white space? And do you want to go into a certain white space, or do you want to go direct head-to-head against a competitor because you have a 10x better offering? Once you've done that, then you really put it all together in terms of your messaging. There's two components to your messaging. The first one is your value proposition. This is how you communicate what you do in one sentence. You also want to communicate why you're 10 times better than the rest. And you also want to have a strategic narrative. That's a longer form version of how you really communicate why you do what you do, why your customers need to take action now, and why they need to go with you. I call this a manifesto. Once you have these pieces, you have your go-to-market plan. Now, most people don't even do these pieces and just jump to the execution, and that's why most go-to-market initiatives fail. But when you do these 5 steps, you have a proper plan and a strategy, then you can drive your execution. There are 13 different ways you can bring your message to your ideal customers on a consistent basis. You could do inbound, outbound, and channels. The key here is to start with one channel, collect the right data, make sure your messaging is resonating, and then iterate and scale from there. And you do these 6 steps, you'll be able to accelerate your path to that next stage of growth. Now you know the 6 steps to building an effective go-to-market plan. What you may not know is, TK, how do I figure out if I'm solving an urgent, important problem? How do I define this in the form of a proper ideal customer profile? How do I find the right macro trends? What are good macro trends and what are bad macro trends? You may be wondering, what segment of the market do I want to position against? You may be wondering, do I go after the white space, or is it a bad market? Or do I go after this direct competitor? If I'm going after this direct competitor, how do we compete to win? You may be wondering, how do I craft my messaging so that grandma understands what I do and it's not overly complicated? Or you may be wondering, how do I structure my strategic narrative because my sales cycles are long and I really need to drive action inside of my sales process? Or you may be thinking about, look, I have my messaging and my targeting, but which channel do I use and how do I win in that channel? Maybe you want to do LinkedIn, or you want to do Twitter, or you want to do ads, or you want to do SEM, and you really want to figure out the right mix and really collect the right data so you can scale. So if you're in this stage where you're building out your go-to-market plan and you really want to execute on this in the right way, and you want to reduce execution risk, and you want a step-by-step process on building out your go-to-market plan, executing on it, and driving growth for your SaaS business, this is why I created my SaaS go-to-market coaching program. Inside of this program, I help you go from a relatively undefined go-to-market plan to a well-defined and scalable go-to-market machine that you can execute on. The way we do this is 3 key steps. The first step is we build out an ideal customer profile. Now, everyone thinks they have an ICP until they work with me. I follow a 29-point process to guide you in really fleshing out your ICP, and it includes your urgent, important problem identification, macro trends, and even positioning. That ICP helps you really hone in on the segment of the market that you will be targeting. Once you have your ICP, then I teach you how to build out your manifesto. Your manifesto is the framework that I use to flesh out your value proposition. It's your messaging, it's your strategic narrative. It's how you communicate to the market why you do what you do, why you do it better than anyone else, and why they should buy from you. Once you have these 2 pieces, you have your go-to-market plan and strategy. Then comes the 3rd pillar. The 3rd pillar is a Broadway show. A Broadway show is a consistent set of sales and marketing activities that you can execute on to bring your manifesto to your ICP on a consistent basis. As I mentioned, there's 13 different ways to go to market and go into different channels, but that can be overwhelming. So I'll teach you which channels to start with, what data to collect, and how to iterate and scale as it starts to work. I even teach you exactly who to hire in what order and how to evaluate them so that you can truly scale and go from founder-led to founder-leveraged. It is an incredible program. It's my 6th year running the program. We've shared so many success stories, and we continue to share the success stories inside of the program. So if you'd like to work together, just go to tkkader.com/GTM. tkkader.com/GTM, and you'll get all of the details. Now, the better the fit, the better the results, which is why in that page, you'll get all the details on how the program works and how to work together with me. What we ask of you is to fill out a small application form and book a call with us. On the call, we'll figure out where you are, what your goals are, what's holding you back. And if it sounds like it's the fit, then we'll be off to the races right away. So just go to tkkader.com/GTM. Now, if you got value from this video, which hopefully you did, if you're still watching, please smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. It just loves it when you do that. If you have a fellow founder, if you have a team member that would get value from this video, please share this video with them. If you're part of a WhatsApp group, a Slack group, a Reddit group of other SaaS founders that would get value from this video, please share this with them as well. We want to serve and help as many SaaS founders as possible. Also, I drop an episode every single Sunday with actionable strategies and tactics from the trenches on how to grow your SaaS business faster. So be sure to hit that subscribe button and that bell icon, and you'll get notified every single time I drop an episode. And lastly, remember, everyone needs a strategy for their life and their business. When you are with us, yours is going to be unstoppable. I'm TK, and I'll see you in the next episode or inside the SaaS Go-to-Market Coaching Program. Thank you, everybody, and take care.